Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing really well. So in today's episode, oh boy, we are talking about Fresh, the brand new release on the streaming service Hulu. So my usual format for reviewing movies is usually to give you guys some movie facts, some little fun film nuggets for you, and then talk about the positive and negative aspects about the movie. But that is not what we're doing today. No. Because I personally could not find a single negative with this movie. I loved this movie, and the funny thing is I had a feeling that I was going to really like it. I don't know if that's just me or if other people have it as well, where you get a feeling about a film, and I had it about Fresh and I was not disappointed. And it is so exciting that we are only in March, and I know I already have a few movies that are going to be in my top movies of 2022. So, seeing as how we're not going to be talking about any negative aspects, I thought instead I would split it into a non-spoiler section and a spoiler section episode, and I will still include the little movie facts for you as well. I will of course give a heads up when I start the spoiler section, so if you haven't seen the film yet, you can stick around for the movie facts and the non-spoiler section, and then I will let you know when the spoilers are about to start. So Fresh is a director debut from Mimi Cave, and it was written by Lauren Kahn. Fresh actually premiered at the Sundance Film Festival on the 20th of January 2022, and then it was released on the 4th of March on the streaming service Hulu. It has received mostly positive reviews from both Sundance and general critics as well, having a Fresh rating, no pun intended, on Rotten Tomatoes of 81% and an audience rating of 82%. Screenwriter Lauren Kahn is actually a fan of the horror genre and has apparently said that writing Fresh, she wanted to write a movie that was accessible and enjoyable to both fans of the horror genre and the non-horror genre. And my last movie fact is that Fresh's opening credit scene doesn't actually hit the screen until 33 minutes into the movie. Okay, so let's move on to the non-spoiler section of the review. So Fresh follows Noah, who meets the alluring Steve at a grocery store and, given her frustration with dating apps, takes a chance and gives him her number. After their first date, Noah is smitten and accepts Steve's invitation to a romantic weekend getaway, only to find that her new paramour has been hiding some unusual appetites. The main point that I want to make clear about Fresh is just how beautiful a movie it is visually. The cinematography in this film is absolutely stunning, and I said wow out loud quite a few times at different scenes. There are some really interesting choices made when it comes to the camera angles and the camera movement. There are a few scenes in it where we get really up close and personal with some of our characters, in particular the two leads, where the camera will really focus on a single part of their face. Maybe it's their mouth or an eye. There's other ones as well where the focal point of the scene, the character that we're focusing on, is just off centre. They're not actually the focal point. And the style of shot changes too. We have Steadicam shots, handheld cameras, we have POV shots, and we also have a couple of panning shots that are used really, really well. And like the camera angles and movement, the editing has some interesting choices as well. There were a couple of scenes that stood out to me. One of them is earlier on in the movie where Steve and Noah are talking together in a bar, and the action actually moves onto the future in a few minutes, but their conversation in the bar is continuing, so it ends up being a narration over what they're doing now. And then there's a scene between them both later on in the film where they're dancing together, and then the action moves on again to only a few minutes in the future, but it intercuts back to the dance scene. And a lot of the movie has this wonderful warm amber tone to it through the scenes, and the romantic love scenes have light flares in them as well. Fresh is also filmed with Dolby Atmos sound, and I think it really helps add the level of enjoyment to the movie. For example, there's a scene about 25 to 30 minutes into the film where Steve and Noah are going into a building, and as the camera pans upwards, it shows that the building is surrounded by trees, and the only thing that we hear is the soft blowing breeze, and then these creaks as the trees move in the breeze. And it's quite a pivotal scene within the movie, and I think that everything that's done in it when it comes down to the audio and the visuals is just done perfectly. Another point that I want to make about Fresh is that the two leads in this movie are absolutely killing it. They are giving stellar performances, and they land every aspect of the movie and every layer of their character. It stars Daisy Edgar-Jones as Noah and Sebastian Stan as Steve. Now, I haven't seen Daisy Edgar-Jones in anything else. I was looking at her IMDb page, and it looks like she's done mostly TV shows up to this point. I am a fan of Sebastian Stan. I have seen him in other things. I've not seen his other Hulu recent release of Pam and Tommy yet though. So story-wise, Fresh is an exploration of the online dating world and the dangers, the disappointments and potential horrors of it. And I think that they do this in a really good way. I think they give a good portrayal of it, and it's important that they do this because it helps us understand the character of Noah better and her approach to her relationship with Steve. But there is a lot more to Fresh than just this in terms of plot and in messages that the film has to deliver. And while I would recommend going into this film as blind as you can do, I think what's really good about this film is that even if you have had a few spoilers, because the film has been out for a week or so now, you know, maybe you've had a few spoilers given, or you feel like you know the overall idea of the movie, I would still say give it a try, because there are enough twists and turns and reveals within the film to still have a high level of entertainment. So we're now going to move into the spoiler section of Fresh. So if you haven't seen this film yet and you don't want any spoilers, that would be your cue to go. Okay, so I just want to jump back to a comment that I made in the non-spoiler section and expand a little bit on that. And that is involving the use of the camera and how they actually use the camera to tell a bit more of the story in a couple of the scenes. They mostly do this through Noah's POV shots. There's one after the credit scene, or is it before the credit scene, where Steve has drugged Noah, and the audience becomes aware of this because they're flipping between Steve and Noah's POV shots, and every time we flip back to Noah's POV shot, it's got just that little bit blurrier, and so the audience is aware that she's been drugged before she is aware of it. And then a little bit later on, Noah asks Steve if she can go for a shower, and she's using this opportunity to find a way to escape. And again, through POV shots, we can see Noah looking at her environment and trying to find an escape route. So Fresh is a really clever movie. I think that it is very cleverly written. Every little detail in the film is there for a reason, and there's lots of recurring images and themes and little bits of foreshadowing, and it just adds an extra level of enjoyment to it. And I can't wait to rewatch this film and go back and see if there was anything else that I missed on the first watch. Fresh is a really foodie movie. There are so many shots in this film of food being misted in grocery stores, of food being prepped, cooked, food on plates, food being eaten, food being chewed, and I'm talking real up close and personal shots of food being chewed. The idea of consumption plays a really big part in this film, and this makes sense once you know the second layer to the movie, the layer and twist of cannibalism and the community of people who order human meat from Steve. And I love that there's so many little hidden details throughout the film that kind of give away the second layer to the film. There's the two lead characters are often drinking red drinks like red wine, which evokes the image of drinking blood. And when Noah's in the grocery store and meets Steve, there is a fresh meat sign near her, and then there's the painting that Steve has in his house that Noah's looking at, and you can just see it has a few human hairs in it and a tooth in it. And then there's a piece of dialogue between Steve and Noah on one of their dates where Noah says, "Are you sure I can't get you anything to drink or eat?" And Steve responds with, "No, just you." There's also a lot of imagery of human limbs that is mostly shown to us through the pieces of artwork that Steve has in his house. And this idea of showing clues about the movie within pieces of artwork, it really reminded me of Midsommar. In fact, Fresh actually reminded me of Midsommar quite a few times throughout it. It might not be a daylight horror, but it certainly is dealing with horrific subject matter like Midsommar, but is delivered to us in a lighter way, not through the safety of the daylight necessarily, but through the use of music and some of the comedic tone. And Noah is targeted by Steve like Danny is by the cult, because she's vulnerable, because of the headspace that she's in at that time, because she's quite isolated due to not having any family or many friends. And while Steve is shown to be very caring and supportive of Noah later on when she's locked up in his cell, he's supportive of her in a situation that he has put her in, that he has created, just as the cult is supportive and emotionally connective with Danny in Midsommar, but in situations that they have themselves created, that they have put her in. So Fresh is marketed as a dark comedy thriller, and yes, there are thriller elements to it and dark comedic elements in it, but I I think it definitely crosses over into the horror genre. I mean, once you hit that second half of the film, once we know what business Steve is in, the business of harvesting women to take their meat and sell it to his clients for them to eat, we definitely get some shocking and horrifying scenes within it. And I think that Fresh is just overall quite a shocking movie. It's shocking that it goes in one direction and then changes into another. It's quite shocking what Steve is actually doing to these women. So yeah, there's plenty of twists and turns and shock moments within the film. So what I really love about Fresh is that while it does deal with some gruesome content and it could border on being a body horror, none of the visuals are that explicit in the love scenes or the operation scenes, and I think that makes Fresh a really accessible movie for lots of different audiences, including people who are not necessarily a fan of horror or a fan of body horror. The visuals are more implied and left to your own imagination, but it does still manage to have that level of passion or level of unease or horror that those scenes should have. There were a few scenes that did make me uncomfortable and I found a little difficult to watch, but that's because I personally don't like anything medical or hospital or operation based. So one of my favourite scenes in the movie is when Steve is dancing to the song Obsession and he's prepping and vacuum packing the meat from one of the women's legs. And I love how the song that they chose is so fun and high energy, and he's having the time of his life, and it's contrasted with something that he's doing that is really horrifying. And I found it really funny, the little detail that when he packs up the vacuum packed meat, he puts in a photo, like a named photo of the woman that it came from in each of the boxes, and he puts some of their personal belongings in as well, like it might be a bra or sunglasses or a phone case. I thought that was a really nice little touch. And the other thing that I love about this scene is that it really does tell us something about the character Steve, and that is that the Steve that we met earlier in the movie, that's really Steve. You know, the humorous side, the wanting to dance to fun songs, that is him. There was no act, no pretense. And I think this is very cleverly done, because that to me is absolutely terrifying, that, you know, he was just being himself and he's still that same charming, funny guy. And that is the guy that is capable of doing what he's doing. To be honest with you, I think all of the song choices in this movie were really, really good. They're all from the 80s or early 90s, and they're all either high energy or fun or entertaining, and they contrast so well with the dark content of the story, but they also contrast really well with the ominous dark tone to the movie's original score. And I also think that choosing Heads Will Roll as the credit song was a really good choice, because it perfectly captures that kick-ass element of the end scene. So as well as cannibalism, Fresh does have a lot to say on the online dating world, toxic men, women's safety, and choices that women can make to help keep themselves safe. So there's a scene where Noah is saying she can't believe how stupid she's been and she can't believe she's allowed herself to get into this situation. And her neighbouring cellmate says, "Don't do that. Don't blame yourself. This isn't your fault. It's always theirs." Now this is an interesting comment to make, because as an audience we have seen that Noah has ended up in this predicament because of both her and Steve. Steve created the situation, but Noah, blinded by her frustration and her loneliness, perhaps wasn't as cautious as she could have been and has ended up in this situation. And the movie shows us a contrast between Noah and Molly in how they behave in certain situations. Molly is telling people what she's doing. She's sharing her device's location. She's very aware of red flags and responding to them. Whereas Noah just mentions to Molly that she's going away and to a general area. She doesn't really take many precautions. But despite all the precautions that she takes, both Molly and Noah end up in the exact same situation. So I'm not really clear on what message the movie is trying to tell me. It's obviously highlighting the dangers that are out there and ways that these dangers can be avoided, but I don't think the movie is placing the blame with either sex. It doesn't victim shame Noah and does show her as generally quite a clever, cautious person. And while Penny, the cellmate, lays the blame with men, I don't think the movie agrees with this statement. Although I have to say, there was one scene that I found absolutely hilarious towards the end of the film. There's this guy that's been helping Molly try to track down Noah, and Molly shared her device location with this guy. And when Molly herself goes missing, this guy goes off investigating to try and find Molly by going to the last known location of her device. In the meantime, the women have escaped their cells, are going out of the building, and it's like, oh, the man is here with a car. Surely he can save them now. They can get in the car and drive away to safety. And when the man gets out of the car, I can't remember the character's name, but I suppose it doesn't really matter. He hears Steve screaming after the women. He hears him firing his weapon, and he straight up nopes out of that situation, gets back in his car, drives off, and leaves the women behind. Another message from the movie comes at the very end, as we see that Noah is, despite having disasters in the dating area, not in fact alone in life, and she is very much loved by somebody, and that is her friend Molly. So the movie's perhaps showing us that you don't need a romantic partner to feel loved in life, to feel supported and whole in life. I have to say that with all these messages and themes going on, I did wonder if the cannibalism itself acts as a metaphor for something else, perhaps trafficking, or for men taking non-literal pieces of women, whether it's their equality, their safety, their identity, or their confidence. Interesting thought. But whatever the actual messages are, Fresh has so much to it to unpick, to unravel, and to talk about. You might even say it has a lot of meat to it. Sorry, I couldn't resist. So that's it, guys, my thoughts on Fresh. I loved this film and I would highly, highly recommend it. As I said, it does have some gruesome content, but none of the visuals are explicit and most of it is implied. And I would say the romance and the dark comedy hits just right and is never overloaded. And the two main leads give an absolutely incredible performance. I'd love to know your guys' thoughts on Fresh, so let's have a conversation about it down in the comments below. And don't forget, if you liked this review, don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. In the meantime, thank you as always for stopping by. I really do appreciate it. Take care of yourselves and I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye, guys.